Welcome back, everybody. I'm Brian Holmes, president and lead pastor of Empowered Christian Ministries and author of Ready, Set, Go, a 30-day guide for new believers, faith foundations for the Christian life. This video is being made to help facilitate your one-on-one discipleship or small group discussion time. If you don't have the book yet, get a copy from your church or small group leader, or there's links to all the versions available at empoweredchristian.org/Ready, Set, Go. If you're with your group now, just save the link and order it later. If you have any newcomers to the group or if you haven't warmed up yet, pause the video now and do the short icebreaker that I gave on day 15. All right, let's jump into the lesson. This week we've read day 21, From Egypt to the Promised Land, a survey of Exodus through Deuteronomy. The book of Exodus picks up where Genesis left off, the Israelites becoming slaves in Egypt, the life of Moses, their exodus out of Egypt, the giving of God's law after this, the history of Israel in the wilderness for 40 years. So this lesson, we're going to outline and survey key parts of these books and then give you opportunity to talk about each of these 4 books. One of the features of this lesson is that I went through each of these books and did a chapter by chapter breakdown. I hope that this summary has helped you get a better understanding of the big picture of what's in each of these books, as well as serving as a reference guide to easily find important things later on. First, we look at the book Exodus, which book's name means a going out or a departure. Its literary type is history and law, and it was written by Moses around 1440 BC, after the Exodus from Egypt 5 years earlier than this. We saw how Moses first encounters God at the burning bush in chapter 3, and I highlighted one of the things that God said to him in the first part of page 141. And then I also highlighted what God said in Exodus chapter number 6, using this name and how he is bringing himself into greater intimacy with the Jewish people. How this name I am was actually used by Jesus later on in John chapter 8. Let's let somebody volunteer to read each one of these verses. Somebody to read Exodus 3, another person to volunteer to read Exodus 6, and then again, somebody else reading the part in John chapter 8. And then let's discuss what the implications of this are. Why do you think God was revealing himself with greater intimacy using these names? So let's go ahead and pause the video now and go through those verses and then just open up for conversation if anybody wants to share any thoughts that they have about that. The rest of the book of Exodus shows all kinds of amazing things. The 10 plagues, the first Passover, God leading the Israelites through the wilderness, right? Going through the Red Sea and God parting the sea, the 10 commandments being given, Israel committing idolatry with the golden calf in chapter 32, and many other important things. So I have each of those broken down chapter by chapter, at least the key points. And so if there's any other thoughts you guys have, you want to discuss these things in greater detail, let's go ahead and pause the video and give everyone an opportunity to share any thoughts, questions, concerns, or things that you would like to share and discuss with the group. The second book we looked at in this lesson, the third book of the Bible, is Leviticus, and it gets this name from Levi, who is the one tribe of the 12 tribes responsible for carrying out all of the priestly duties. Again, like Exodus, its literary type is history and law, and it was written by Moses about the same time, around 1440 BC, right after the Exodus. This book is mostly about God's rules for Israel to follow, directing the newly formed nation into right living. These Levitical laws offer us all different kinds of insight into the sacrificial system, the priesthood, and just really recognizing God's holiness and how it is through atonement of some form that we begin to enter into right relationship with God, and how all of this ultimately points us forward to Jesus. One of the key passages that I highlighted was in Leviticus 10, where We actually see what happened with Nadab and Abihu. Let's let somebody volunteer to read that. And then also, I highlighted in Leviticus chapter 11 how God said how he wants us to consecrate ourselves, and how there's still a principle there that we need to apply to our lives today. Just because we're in the new covenant, just because we have faith in Jesus, doesn't mean God stopped being holy. And it doesn't mean he doesn't want us to still be holy. We're not going to get our holiness through these rituals, through these laws about food and, cleanliness and all that stuff. It's no longer through external things, but now through an internal cleanliness through faith in Jesus, right? God doesn't want us to just follow the law outwardly like he did with Israel. He has written the law on our hearts, as I quoted there in Hebrews 10 and 1 Peter 1. So let's let somebody read what I have there in Leviticus 10, verses 2 and 3, as well as another person who hasn't yet read Leviticus 11 there. And also go and read the part in Hebrews 10 and 1 Peter 1 at the very end of that section. And then let's pause the video and take time to discuss anything you want to share about these topics. The third book in this lesson is the book of Numbers. This book gets its name because it contains a detailed census of the Israelite community, and it contains rules for how to organize the tribes. Again, its literary type is also history and law, and it was written by Moses, completed about 1405 BC. So you'll notice this one is about 35 or so years later, because this book actually records all of the history of the trials and the journeys and things that Israel did during those 40 years within the wilderness. So even though it's called Numbers, it actually records more of the actual story that happened during those 40 years. One of the key parts of this book was in Numbers 21 with the bronze serpent, and how this was a foreshadowing of Jesus, who is referenced in John chapter 3. So let's let two other people volunteer to read each one of those passages that you see in the text there, and then pause the video and discuss this or anything else that came up in this book. And then the final book in this section, concluding our full Torah, which included Genesis as well, is Deuteronomy. And this book gets its name, meaning second law, because it restates many of the things already written. But as I indicated there, it's better understood as Moses' explanation of the law given to the second generation of Israelites born during their 40 years in the wilderness. Like the others, its literary type is history and law, also written in 1405 BC, actually during the last month of Moses' life. And so it was probably concluded by his apprentice Joshua. Deuteronomy gives a retelling of a lot of these important things from the previous books, but some new information as well. One of the passages that I highlighted was in Deuteronomy 6, where we learn about the Shema, and then how Jesus said this was the most important command. Another section that I highlighted in this book was chapters 27 through 30, where it lists God's promises of blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience. And so even though we are no longer under the same covenant that the Jews were at the time, a lot of these blessings and curses still apply to us because they're related to God's eternal attributes, which means they're timeless. His attributes of righteousness, holiness, and justice. So even as Gentiles in the new covenant, not living in Israel under the Torah law, these things still apply to us. And so by understanding and reading through those, we can understand where some of that curse breaking stuff we looked at on day 12 can come into play. And then I concluded this book just talking about how Moses repeatedly called Israel to take the land that God promised by oath to their forefathers. And this is quoted numerous times there in the text. This was really a key important thing, that it wasn't about them just going and getting the land because they were good or because God wanted them to. This was all about fulfilling the promise that God first made with Abraham and then with Isaac and Jacob. So let's go ahead and pause the video. We'll let another person volunteer to read Deuteronomy 6. And then if you want to read, another person could read any one of those parts that Jesus said this was the most important command. And then anything else you guys want to share and discuss within your group, let's just open it up to whoever would like to share. If anyone hasn't spoken yet, let's give them an opportunity to share their thoughts about any of the other sections or things that are coming to your mind now. These 4 books are super important, and together with the Torah, they really give us an understanding of not only the foundations of the Jewish and Christian faith, they help us understand and give a reference point to a lot of the things that come later on. So it's important that we remember these things and embrace them because they flavor and influence everything that shows up later on in the text. All right, so I hope this conversation has blessed you and that learning more about these books has helped you appreciate where our faith originated. If you haven't already yet, visit empoweredchristian.org/ready, set, go, and you can visit our e-course version where you're able to leave comments or ask me questions. You can also click on our YouTube list there and go and leave a comment in any of the videos there. I'd love to hear your testimonies. I want to hear how this stuff is blessing you. Many Christians, unfortunately, were told to read the Bible and they don't know anything about a lot of these books. And so I hope by surveying them and even looking at some of the chapter by chapter breakdown and summaries of some of these things, you can quickly get a bird's eye view of what is in all of this content and appreciate it. And even if you don't remember everything that you learn, because there's a lot of content there, at least you understand the big picture, the big idea. And you can go back and relearn certain key points because they're easy to find because there's a chapter by chapter breakdown. So I hope this lesson has been a blessing to you. This week, go ahead and read day 22, which is going to take us through the rest of the books of the Old Testament. All right, so I hope this has blessed you. Be well, and we'll see you next week. God bless.